Principal suspends. Poor kid for clothes finds out his story the next day. Have you ever been judged based on how you look or the clothes you wear? It's easy for people to assume things about someone based on their appearance. But what if those assumptions were wrong? This is the story of a poor kid who was humiliated and suspended for his clothes, only for the principal to learn the shocking truth about his life the very next day. Stay with me as we uncover how appearances can deceive, and how one principal's hasty decision led to a powerful lesson in empathy, understanding, and redemption. The early morning sun streamed through the classroom windows as students filed into Adams High School. The typical hum of chatter filled the air as young voices discussed their plans for the day, their latest hobbies, and their weekend adventures. But in the midst of all the noise, one student stood out, not because of his words, but because of his presence. Michael Turner walked into the school hallway that morning wearing clothes that were too big for him, faded jeans with a tear in one knee, and a worn-out shirt that had seen better days. His shoes, scuffed and old, scraped against the polished floor as he walked. His hair was messy and his posture was slouched, like someone who had learned to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders at an age far too young. Michael wasn't a troublemaker. He was quiet, reserved, and often kept to himself. But there was one thing about him that set him apart from his peers: his family's financial struggles. Michael's mom worked 2 jobs, and his father was never in the picture. They lived in a cramped apartment on the outskirts of town, and every day Michael did his best to navigate a world that often overlooked him because of his appearance. At school, his classmates made fun of his clothes, and teachers rarely acknowledged him. It was hard enough being a teenager, but being from a poor family only made things worse. Michael had learned to keep his head down and avoid drawing attention to himself. His focus was on getting through each day and taking care of his younger sister, who depended on him more than anyone could imagine. That morning, as he entered the school building, Michael didn't expect much. He didn't expect anyone to smile at him or to compliment his clothes, but he also didn't expect what would happen next. Principal Carla Davis stood in her office reviewing student attendance records and preparing for the day ahead. She was known for being strict but fair, a no-nonsense leader who had built a reputation for maintaining order in her school. She prided herself on keeping things running smoothly, and every student was held to the same standard, no exceptions. At least that was how she saw things. When Michael walked into the school that morning, Principal Davis caught a glimpse of him through the window. She frowned. His clothes were inappropriate for the school environment, in her opinion. Torn jeans and a shirt that looked like it belonged in a thrift store. She thought to herself that he wasn't setting a good example for the other students. She had seen kids come to school in poor attire before, but something about Michael's appearance bothered her more than usual. As the day went on, Principal Davis kept an eye on Michael, who appeared to be getting through the morning without causing trouble. However, when lunchtime came, Michael sat at his usual spot in the cafeteria, alone. As always, he ate quietly and didn't interact with the other students much. A few minutes into the lunch period, a teacher approached Principal Davis and reported that Michael had been disruptive in class. He had been caught not paying attention, and his behavior was affecting the learning environment. Without much thought, Principal Davis marched down to the cafeteria, her mind already made up. She could not tolerate students who didn't respect school rules. When she saw Michael sitting at his table, she approached him, tapping him sharply on the shoulder. "Michael Turner, I need to speak with you," she said sternly. "You are suspended for the rest of the day due to your behavior and your inappropriate clothing. You'll need to go home immediately." Michael looked up in surprise, his eyes wide. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't even been aware that he was causing any problems. But before he could speak, Principal Davis turned and walked away, leaving him standing there in stunned silence. That night, as Michael sat at home, he couldn't help but feel a sting in his chest. The suspension, while brief, was humiliating. His classmates would talk about it the next day, and they would laugh at him, not understanding why he had been sent home. His mom would be disappointed. She always told him to stay out of trouble. But how could he explain to her that he hadn't done anything wrong? How could he tell her that he had been punished simply for looking the way he did? As he sat there, trying to make sense of what had happened, his younger sister, Lily, walked into the room. She had been playing outside with her friends, her cheeks rosy from the cold air. "Why are you home early?" Lily asked innocently, her wide eyes filled with concern. Michael forced a smile and ruffled her hair. "I'm fine, sis," he said, his voice trying to sound calm. "Just a little time off today." Lily didn't ask any more questions, but Michael could see the worry in her eyes. He knew that she depended on him for so much, and he hated that he couldn't shield her from the harshness of the world. The next day, when Principal Davis arrived at school, she was bombarded with a phone call that would change her entire perspective. It was from the superintendent's office, and it was about Michael Turner. "Principal Davis, we need you to meet with Mr. Turner's guardian as soon as possible," the voice on the other end of the line said. "It's urgent. Please make time today." "His guardian?" Principal Davis asked, puzzled. She didn't realize that Michael had any legal guardian. He was just a student as far as she knew. The conversation quickly ended and she went about her day, but curiosity gnawed at her. Later that morning, she was summoned to the principal's office. She walked in, and there, standing in front of her, was a man in a business suit. Tall, well-dressed, and authoritative. Beside him stood a woman, and both had a serious, almost intimidating air about them. "Principal Davis, I'm Michael's uncle, James Turner," the man said, extending his hand. "This is my wife, Linda." Principal Davis shook his hand, still uncertain about the purpose of this meeting. "We're here about the incident that happened yesterday," James continued. "Michael was suspended for his clothes, but I think you need to know something about him before you pass judgment on him again." As the conversation unfolded, Principal Davis was shocked to learn that Michael wasn't just a poor, misunderstood student. He was part of a prestigious family. James Turner was the CEO of a major corporation, and his wife, Linda, was a successful lawyer. They had taken Michael in after his parents had passed away in a tragic accident when he was just a child. Despite his family's wealth and status, Michael had never once mentioned it at school. He had never used his last name as a way to gain favor, and he had certainly never flaunted his family's money. In fact, the clothes that Principal Davis had judged him for were simply the result of his humility. Michael didn't care for designer clothes or the latest trends. He preferred to blend in, to live simply, and focus on his education. The suspension had been a humiliating experience for him, and his uncle and aunt were outraged. "I understand that rules are important, but Michael is a good student," James Turner said firmly. "He didn't deserve to be punished for something as trivial as his clothes. We want to make sure this doesn't happen again." Principal Davis, now realizing the gravity of her mistake, felt a deep sense of shame. She had allowed her assumptions about Michael's appearance to cloud her judgment. She hadn't taken the time to learn about his background, nor had she shown the compassion and understanding that every student deserved. The next day, Principal Davis publicly apologized to Michael in front of the entire school. She called him to the office and made a heartfelt announcement, expressing regret for her actions and making it clear that Michael was a valuable part of the school community, regardless of his clothes or background. "Michael, I want to apologize," Principal Davis said, her voice steady but filled with sincerity. "You are a student here, and you deserve to be treated with respect, no matter what you wear. I've learned an important lesson today. Never judge someone by their appearance." Michael stood silently, but a small smile tugged at his lips. He knew that this moment was more than just about his suspension. It was about the power of understanding and the importance of looking beyond the surface. This story teaches us an important lesson. Appearances can be deceiving. We may not always know the struggles or the strengths of those around us. It's easy to judge someone based on their clothes, their demeanor, or their background, but that judgment often misses the real story. In the end, it's our compassion and understanding that shape the world we live in, not our assumptions. Michael Turner's story reminds us all to take a step back and look beyond the surface, to listen more, understand more,